there's more at play than just the interests of capital.
Well, yeah, and
It's
that is why we need this like sort of analysis that Bauer is doing, and not just like I guess economic reductionist sorts of like analysis of the situation, right?
yeah. I actually have had discussions, friendly but fiercely debated, very contentious discussions about this precise question, and even about this precise book with um, here I'm going to say economic reductionist kind of Marxists, people who are like nothing matters except for the question of labor and capital. So all this other stuff is a distraction, or it's not useful, or whatever. And that is the kind of thinking that leads people like us to stand outside of the let's call it the fray, which is also to put it even less charitably, uh, usefulness. To make That's what makes us stand outside of usefulness.
Mm.
Like if there are like 20 people and five of them want to go over here and the rest of them want to go over here, and we say, oh, none of you should be thinking about this. It's like, well, they don't want. Well, that's a really dumb analogy. Never mind. Forget that analogy.
Embrace your analogies, Jason.
Well, I just mean like it's not. It doesn't clarify anything. All
I
I
think
really mean to say is that if we say to people that the things which dominate their lives and their thinking, the things which
Yeah.
amount to what for them is an existential question, and if all we have to say is that's not real, that's a distraction, we should not be surprised if nobody wants to listen to us.
Can I
Yeah.
clarify? I do think my point here is that the quote itself is, I think it's on somewhere between 319 and 324, because I didn't list the page number. The desire for domination felt by every bourgeois national party is exposed as soon as it rejects national autonomy. I feel like I'm not saying that the desire for national autonomy is like a distraction. I am saying I think what Bauer is implying here is that a proletarian push for national autonomy should be an effort of the proletarian movement, because the bourgeois national parties will reject it. And I think the question that I'm bringing up is like, will the bourgeois parties reject it? I think there are other interests, and that, like you said, like in times, as long as there's like peaceful transferences of wealth, or as long as the free flow of capital can continue, like there are a lot of other reasons, but I don't actually think the national bourgeois is opposed to national autonomy. It's like the Hegelian analysis of like a person grows up and doesn't like fish, and they're like, oh, well, you ate fish a lot as a kid, or well, you didn't have fish a lot as a kid. It's like, well, there's clearly something else. There's a different reason, because both of
Right.
those can be reasons. So like, what's the actual reason that the national bourgeoisie would not support national autonomy, or would support
So
national autonomy?
I
And
think
I don't
he
think it's just
says,
on the basis of national autonomy.
yeah, I think he says it in the following paragraph on 320. And maybe this isn't the whole encapsulation of things it could be, but he does say that um again after that sentence, however, it is not only the situation in the empire, but also the struggles of the nations of the provinces and parishes that are pushing toward national autonomy. And I think this is one of the key parts. The Germans still dominate the representative bodies of some parishes, in which they don't constitute only a minority of the population. This position, which they owe to the plutocratic parish electoral system, is today under threat everywhere. So I think with that being said, they will take it if, yes, capital is still moving freely, but also if they still hold administrative authority over the majority of the population. If if your national autonomy movement, as I think Bauer is stating, leads to a proletarian surge, and now the proletariat holds a majority or a supermajority, or just dominates the entirety of the representative bodies, I do not think that they would allow a national autonomous movement to actually arise. I don't think that it would be in their interest, because obviously, as we're just discussing, many of the interests that would push proletarian peoples into the realm of these electoral systems and these administrative systems are not simply economic, but I guess to use Bauer's language here, they're also representative or administrative. So if capital flows and the economic power still remains within the grasp of the bourgeoisie, cool. If the administrative and representative bodies of the land are still under, at least in my mind, a majority of their control, also cool, will accept it. But if they're not, if one to two of those fall outside of their power and in the hands of the proletariat or some perhaps nascent, if Austria-Hungary split into two empires and they were under threat of Hungary becoming the larger, more powerful empire, the more economically advanced empire, I struggle to see why they would not, or why they would rather accept that as normal.
So I think that is making the argument that like that's not making an economic determinist argument. I think that is like lining up with what I'm saying though, is that I just don't think on its face the national bourgeoisie will reject national autonomy. It depends on other conditions. And so I think in any way that like national autonomy can be a distraction, it's not a distraction for people seeking national autonomy. It's a distraction for a socialist party to push that in order to further proletarian demands. It's like, no,
Yeah.
if a proletariat is going to like push for national autonomy and there's going to be a national growth in that, then there is going to be a reaction by the bourgeoisie that then strengthens the proletarian movement. But we shouldn't be pushing towards national autonomy because on its face, the bourgeoisie is not going to inherently reject national autonomy. Does that make sense?
I think that's true. I just think it's again, it's like I'm very hesitant to come down on the side of chemically pure analyses of any kind.
Yeah.
Like people feel things, and those things are sometimes at odds with each other. Then that those contradictions are very normal, very natural, and in fact, that's the nature of everything at all times. The nature of existence itself is contradictory, and the constant reshuffling of interests in order to more or less kind of feel stable and secure in life is the human condition. What's so soulless about the rule of bourgeoisie is that its original impulses, which are like liberty and all kinds of attendant, vague, misty-eyed things which we can call fanciful. All the other things about the bourgeoisie as it comes into existence and comes into prominence, those things are all subordinate and even at odds with the maintenance of, the furthering of a particular interest of the bourgeoisie, which is the commercial interest, which is the material benefit of capital flow and capital accumulation. And so a national bourgeoisie is happy to support national autonomy or oppose national autonomy, depending upon a bunch of other considerations. The primary one is what is good for capital. But what's good for capital is very highly contingent upon a bunch of things, like are all of your subjects, all the people who are going to facilitate your further accumulation of capital, are those people going to be swayed by concerns like national autonomy or national independence? And if they are, what might you need to support in order to maintain that first interest? So I think this is the reason why the rule of the bourgeoisie is contradictory, and it cannot ever be peaceful and reconciled, because the bourgeoisie, they straddle different sets of interests, and those interests are in direct competition with each other at all times. That's really that's all I have to say. I think you're right, but I also feel like I want to put an asterisk.
I mean, I also want to put an asterisk. Like, I don't know if I'm right. I think I'm trying to differentiate between. I'm trying to understand that like this is Bauer again existing in an era where there is an international, which I think is important.
Right.
Which means a lot of these like, and I think the clarification I'm trying to seek with like highlighting that quote and like asking that question is what Bauer in this existence of this organization calling for is the development of national autonomous movements or the co-opting of national autonomous movements for a proletarian cause. Because I think co-opting a national autonomous movement for actual national autonomy is what a socialist movement should be doing. It does seem like with the outright statement that the national bourgeoisie will reject national autonomy, that there's an implication there of developing national autonomy. Like the socialist movement should be developing national autonomous movements, which I think is different than co-opting national autonomous movements. Because if there is a national autonomous movement, then like, yeah, you should be going in and being like, if that like, because it's objectively bad, it will make capital less efficient, capital flow less efficient if there's a Czech national autonomy within the Austrian imperial system, because Czech national autonomy requires the administrative of like the Czech language, which makes capital flow slightly more difficult between German language capital and Czech language. Like there are a lot of things to consider, of course.
Yeah, the turnover increases because you have to.
And so I feel like that's a justifiable thing to call for. But the creation of national autonomy is the question that I have. And it's the question that I have throughout this entire book. This is, should the socialist movement be
like on the ground floor versus...
Yeah.
I think that's just it's not quite what Bauer is concerned with here.
That's fair.
I think it's more like that Bauer is existing in a moment where there are existing national aspirations, either towards autonomy or towards independence.
I mean,
so he's just saying that since this is happening, what is the best way for us to respond? And I think this will be one of my more misty-eyed. This is the thing that will set me apart, and I've been accused of a neo-Kantianism or whatever, which is I would reject, but I recognize it wasn't a genuine. It was just whatever. It was. I think, in as much as we think that there's a value to the complexity of what we might call, in romantic language, we might call the soul, the spirit of people, and how freedom is an articulation of that. I don't think that the interests of freedom, which is the full articulation of the spirit of people, I don't think that freedom is served by subordination of this coherent and complex identity. And when it comes to like language and culture and customs and literature and all of the things which are attendant, they're all downstream of. They all add up to what we might call national aspirations. And so that turns out to be a major dividing line between different camps, different conceptions of the socialist future. Basically, I think that's what different interpretations what internationalism means. Because some people say internationalism means no borders, no nations, we're all just one big people. And another one says, well, yes, borders and nations, but we're all just one big people. And that distinction is pretty crucial. And if you are a Czech-speaking subject of the Austrian Empire, and you say, well, I'm an internationalist, I'm a proletarian, but I feel like I want to teach my children the folk stories and folk music of their grandfathers and in their language. And I feel like if that's lost, that's a part of who we are is lost. And that means a part of our overall self-image is lost. And that means a part of our freedom is lost.
Well, this goes back to what Kevin was saying, like probably like 4-ish like conversations ago, where he was bringing up different native movements in the United States, different Native American cultures, different like indigenous movements, peoples, religions. It's like if the socialist movement is calling for like the abolition of that, the abolition of those like particulars in favor of like a universal, I'm not sure I support that movement. And I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
I think the trick is to try to determine how, so like, rather than blurring all distinctions and forcing a unity on the, I think, a lower order, I think that the recognition of extreme difference and still aspiring toward unity anyways is of a higher order, because it's both a further introspective reflection on the self, and thus, at least hopefully and potentially, a greater ability to appreciate the other self.
I think you just need to embrace your neo-Kantian desire for the proletarian world republic, Jason. But I think what do you call it? I think a lot of this like what we're just talking about ties into, and I feel like this is a general issue like with the left that we keep talking about, the capital L left or whatever the fuck that means. But like there is a big issue with like if you go look at there's so many organizations, they have their like program, they have their I don't know, they're like plant like there's this issue of not being able to see that there are these like developments that are already ongoing. Like when we talk about like getting in on the floor of national autonomy, of a national autonomy movement and like being the impetus, like that's just like not how any national autonomy movement has really arisen in history, as far as I'm
Right.
aware. And like the role as a political organization, specifically a socialist one, is like to the capacity to like intervene in what is already ongoing and to provide like a different structure, a different way of organizing it, a different like impulse and orientation to what's already moving, which is why like if you look at the development of like like historically like successful like socialist movements, it was them um, like taking like starting from the point of like trade union struggles that were already existing, and like even like within that like that's why I really like think this, and this may be getting a little bit far afield, but like just specifically talking about like the proletarian movement, why like the distinction between like trade union consciousness and like class consciousness proper is so important, because I think that's precisely like that trade union consciousness, and I think you could like move outside of the territory of just economic like desires and discuss like national consciousness and whatnot. It's already developing, but to give it this proper like universalist orientation towards like a genuine like emancipatory like direction, it is an ability to like intervene and give and I think Brandon, you've been on this like education thing, and I think that this is really like important. Like I really do think that there is this like educational process that does like kind of emerge out of the situation, and like it's precisely the role of like socialist or communist militants to kind of to be able to intervene in what's to like identify what's already going on, b like be able to communicate to the people who are already experiencing, who are already involved in struggles. They know like their own experience of like what's going on, but like most people have very confused ideas about like what's actually causing the things that they're like embroiled in, and like what's driving them to want something like national autonomy, discussing like national hatreds covering over like class contradiction and whatnot, and it's the ability to go from and I've I know I brought this up with Aurelia, and I think I brought it up with you too, Brandon. This like distinction between like education by like truths proper, like capital T truths, like to be able to understand the truth of the situation that you're in. Like you have this knowledge that already exists in this world. There are these ongoing processes. People already kind of understand the world in a particular way, and it's like being able to like intervene in that situation, almost just disrupt the like ways of like knowing that situation that are already there, and to like point to this different process of like a radically different understanding of the situation, which still incorporates those things that you are already experiencing. It's not just this like pure space like this that like washes your hands of what's already going on, but allows you to like take a step back and then re-intervene into like these ongoing processes in a way that can like actually transform them.
Yeah,
I
I mean
actually,
that's the.
oh,
I was just
that was just super helpful. Sorry, Aurelia.
no,
It's
no,
just,
you're good.
it's just like, I think I'm realizing as you're saying that, Trent, that I think where I'm coming from in the moment is a new left overcorrection tendency that I'm trying to critique
Yeah,
of tailing nationalist movements. The thing
yeah,
that I have to remember is that at the time Otto Bauer is writing this, and then distinctly after Otto Bauer is writing it as well, the question for Marxists is just we're ignoring national movements.
yeah,
We're not going to
yeah. And
intervene.
that would be the not actually intervening and transforming the situation that you're starting from. But yeah,
Yeah.
just like withdrawing. It's just like a pure withdrawal from the world,